In the modern world, connection is no longer a luxury, it's the default. From the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, we are plugged in. Smartphones ping, social feeds scroll endlessly, emails, texts, calls, updates, they never stop. We are constantly tethered to a stream of information that flows faster than we can process and wider than we can comprehend. What was once a tool has become a tide. Digital technology has expanded to every corner of our lives. It shapes how we work, communicate, relax, and even how we think. In the span of a single morning, you might scroll through a dozen headlines, glance at hundreds of photos, send out fragments of yourself through messages and emojis, and still feel behind. Behind on responding, behind on consuming, behind on living. This is the reality of a hyper-connected world, and while it brings remarkable advantages, speed, convenience, opportunity, it also brings an invisible cost, one that builds slowly, quietly, and seeps into the very structure of our minds. Attention spans are shrinking, restlessness is growing, and the mind, once a sanctuary of thought and reflection, has become a battleground of noise. In this always-on culture, where the line between work and rest, presence and distraction has all but disappeared, we've lost something vital: stillness, silence, space. We're conditioned to believe that every moment must be filled, that productivity is the path to worth, that stimulation equals happiness. But underneath this buzz of constant activity lies a deeper truth, one that psychologists, neuroscientists, and spiritual teachers alike have come to recognize: the human mind was not designed to absorb this much, this fast, for this long. Our brains are brilliant, yes, adaptive, creative, endlessly curious, but they are also delicate, sensitive, easily overwhelmed. And in this endless stream of connection, something critical is being drowned out: ourselves, our inner world, our clarity, our calm, our sense of groundedness. So, the question becomes, how do we reclaim it? How do we find peace in a world that never pauses? How do we reconnect, not just to each other, but to ourselves? The answer begins not in escaping the world, but in returning to a forgotten practice, a timeless tool, a quiet rebellion against the chaos: mindfulness. We often think of connection as something inherently positive, and in many ways it is. We can speak to loved ones across continents in seconds, access entire libraries of knowledge in a blink, share our lives, our stories, our voices. But what happens when that connection becomes compulsive? When the pings, the scrolls, the updates are no longer tools, but tethers. Studies now show that the average person checks their phone over 90 times a day, some over 200. Many of those checks happen unconsciously: a glance, a scroll, a refresh. It feels harmless, but it's not. Each small digital interaction pulls at our attention, fracturing it, redirecting it, stealing just a little more of our presence, and that fragmentation adds up. Our focus begins to scatter, our productivity dips, our creativity invades. We sit down to work and find ourselves reaching for a distraction. We try to rest, but our thoughts race, looping through to-do lists, updates, messages left unread. Even in moments of stillness, we find it hard to be still. The mind, constantly stimulated, grows restless without stimulation. And the emotional cost? It's subtle, but significant. Notifications mimic urgency. Red badges create micro-stress responses. Each one activates the brain's alert system, triggering a low-grade version of the fight-or-flight response. The result is a rising tide of anxiety, a sense that something is always happening and we might be missing it. That we should be doing more, knowing more, responding faster. Stress becomes the default. Rest becomes a luxury, and beneath it all is a deeper struggle, a growing discomfort with disconnection. How many of us can sit in silence without reaching for a screen? How often do we feel the urge to check even when there's nothing to see? This is the toll of hyperconnectivity. It doesn't just distract us from the world, it distances us from ourselves, from the quiet voice of intuition, from the body's signals of stress and fatigue, from the present moment where life actually happens. And this disconnection breeds more than just anxiety. It can lead to burnout, emotional exhaustion, even depression. But there is a way forward, not through abandoning technology, but through approaching it differently, with awareness, with intention, with presence. This is where mindfulness enters, not as a buzzword, not as a quick fix, but as a way of seeing, a way of being, a return to wholeness. Mindfulness, a word that has echoed across ancient traditions, modern psychology, and spiritual teachings. But what does it really mean? At its core, mindfulness is the practice of presence. It is the art of paying attention, consciously, deliberately, and without judgment, to what is happening in this very moment. Not the past, not the future, just now, the breath as it flows, the body as it rests, the thoughts as they rise and fall. In a hyper-connected world, mindfulness offers a radical shift. It invites us to pause, to step out of the current, to witness rather than react. And this simple shift, this conscious returning to the present, has profound psychological effects. Research has shown that regular mindfulness practice can reduce stress and anxiety by calming the nervous system, enhance focus and concentration by training the mind to resist distraction, improve emotional regulation, helping us respond instead of react, increase self-awareness, allowing us to observe our habits, triggers, and thought patterns. But mindfulness is not limited to sitting cross-legged in meditation. It can be woven into the fabric of daily life through mindful breathing, pausing to take a few deep, intentional breaths between tasks. Through mindful walking, noticing the feeling of the ground beneath your feet, the rhythm of your steps, the sensations of movement. Through mindful eating, tasting each bite, sensing texture, chewing slowly, giving full attention to the nourishment in front of you. Even mindful scrolling is possible. Pausing before opening an app, asking yourself why, and choosing your intention before diving in. Mindfulness doesn't require hours of silence. It doesn't demand perfection. What it asks for is attention, willingness, presence. It is not a retreat from the world, but a return to it, with clarity, softness, and strength. And the more we practice mindfulness, the more we begin to notice something remarkable. The noise of the world begins to quiet, the urgency begins to soften, the inner landscape becomes more spacious, more grounded, more alive. Mindfulness gives us back what hyperconnectivity takes away: our attention, our peace, our power. Mindfulness is powerful, but only if it's practiced. And in the rush of daily life, the real challenge isn't understanding mindfulness, it's integrating it. How do we stay present when the day is filled with deadlines, obligations, and distractions? How do we stay mindful when we live in a world designed to steal our attention? The answer lies in intentional integration. Mindfulness doesn't need to be a grand ritual. It can begin in just a few minutes a day. Anchor it to routine. The best way to build a habit is to tie it to one that already exists. Try starting your day with 60 seconds of deep breathing before checking your phone. Use moments of transition, like waiting in line, commuting, or brushing your teeth, as reminders to check in. Ask yourself, where is my mind right now? Am I here or lost in thought? Even one mindful breath can reset your nervous system. Practice digital mindfulness. The way we interact with technology shapes our minds. Create boundaries with your devices. Disable non-essential notifications. Designate tech-free zones at home, like the dinner table or the first 30 minutes after waking. Use the Do Not Disturb feature during focus or rest periods. Before opening a social app, ask, "What am I looking for right now?" This shift from compulsion to conscious choice is a mindfulness practice in itself. Schedule mini check-ins, set a recurring reminder on your phone, once in the morning, once midday, once at night. When it goes off, pause. Take 3 slow breaths. Notice how your body feels. Observe your thoughts without judgment, then continue. These micro moments of presence create space in even the busiest schedules. Be kind to your mind. Mindfulness is not about stopping your thoughts. It's not about doing it right. It's about noticing. Each time your mind wanders and you gently bring it back, you are strengthening awareness, just like a muscle. There is no perfection, only practice. And in that practice, something shifts. We begin to see technology as a tool, not a master. We start to catch ourselves before falling into unconscious patterns. We build an inner environment that's calmer, more spacious, more resilient. That's the true integration. Not just practicing mindfulness, but becoming it. In your attention, in your choices, in your relationship to the world. In a world that moves fast, stillness becomes a form of strength. In a world that shouts, silence becomes revolutionary. And in a world that pulls us outward, mindfulness brings us home. Because at its deepest level, mindfulness isn't just a technique. It's a way of being. It teaches us to return to the present moment, not just to escape the chaos, but to meet it with open eyes and a steady heart. It gives us the ability to respond rather than react. To observe our anxiety rather than drown in it, to feel our emotions without being consumed by them. And in this quiet awareness, something powerful emerges. Resilience. Not the brittle kind that resists or fights, but the kind that bends, breathes, and recovers. Mindfulness doesn't remove life's difficulties, but it changes our relationship to them. It teaches us to hold discomfort with compassion, to face uncertainty with groundedness, to find space between the stimulus and the response. That space, that sacred pause, is where growth happens. It's where we reconnect with inner peace. Not the kind of peace that depends on circumstances, but a deeper, quieter peace that lives beneath the noise. A peace that can't be taken by an email, a headline, or a comment thread. This is the peace we long for. The peace we forget is even possible in a hyper-connected world. And yet, it's always available, right here, in this breath, in this moment, because mindfulness is not something we go out and find. It's something we remember, and when we do, when we begin to live with awareness, intention, and care, something profound happens. We become more than just users of technology. We become stewards of our attention. We reclaim our time, our presence, our lives, and in that reclamation, we begin to change, not just ourselves, but the world around us. So pause, breathe, come back to this moment. This is where your power lives. In the age of endless connection, mindfulness is your anchor, your sanctuary, your way home. See you in the next video.